The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. Good morning, I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, June 13th, 2025. We're recording this on Thursday, a day early this week. For today's program, something a bit different. Our Legal Vices edition of The Rundown. About 7 years after the first dispensaries and a casino opened in Western Mass, we'll discuss and debate the state of gaming, as well as legalized marijuana here in the 413. Among the details, we'll unpack some of the results of sports betting, if MGM Springfield will end up in the hands of another company, and gas station weed, or so-called gas station weed, products which generate a high but are unregulated and available to people under 21. Joining us to discuss that and more, Springfield Republican newspaper reporter Jim Kinney.
Good morning.
Paul Tudhill, retired journalist who spent many years covering the 413.
Good morning.
Adam Frenier, a reporter with NEPM.
Hi, Carrie.
And senior counsel at Wilmer Hale, Eric Lesser, who also happened to be a state senator from our region when the rules for both cannabis and sports and casino gambling were all being hammered out in the legislature. Good morning, Eric Lesser.
I see where this is going.
No one's going to blame you.
All right, let's look at our first headline. With the cannabis industry struggling, Western Mass sellers and growers seek relief from High Court. Jim Kinney, no pun intended there. Jim Kinney, you reported on this matter for the Springfield Republican a couple of weeks ago. At least 4 companies with ties to Western Massachusetts are plaintiffs. What do these cannabis companies want?
They want federal recognition. Right now, the cannabis industry across the country is kind of in a weird netherworld, legalized and taxed by states, but still federally illegal. And that means that they're shut out from things like banking, from taking a tax deduction for capital expenses or for some of their expenses. They can't even go bankrupt because that's a federal process. And so you can't exist, you can't cease to exist. You're Schrodinger's pot shop. And it's all happening when the industry is under some pressure. Every time I write about this, I write about how the price is down considerably since when all this opened. There are places that would like to sell and can't find buyers because of the limits on ownership.
The price for cannabis flower being down is what you mean there. Yeah, and it's I even read, I think it was in the Boston Globe, that one of these companies only deals in cash because of those complications with what's happening at the federal level. It was interesting to look at this, though, because during his campaign for the White House, President Trump posted on his own social media platform, Truth Social, that he supports, quote, focus on research to unlock medical uses of marijuana to a Schedule III drug. Currently, it's Schedule I, right up there with heroin. And then work with Congress to pass common sense laws, including safe banking for state-authorized companies and supporting states' rights to pass marijuana laws. But the courts don't seem to be inclined to support that position or the position of the folks here in Western Mass. So far, these cannabis companies have been turned back by the courts twice. Eric Lesser, do you think that the courts should be supporting what these companies are calling for?
Well, it seems like what's going to happen here is the federal courts are going to try to nudge, or might be the impetus for either the Trump administration or Congress to step in and create more federal guidance. If you just look in the last several years, the dynamics around legalized marijuana have changed pretty dramatically. It started, of course, in Colorado. It was at first mostly blue states that had legalized marijuana. Massachusetts was in the middle of the pack in terms of where it ranked in order. But now you have several Republican states that have legalized, and you have a patchwork of different state-specific rules. And of course, it's all still illegal federally. So it's not a sustainable situation. Eventually, there'll need to be a political resolution, either through Congress or through some administrative guidance through DOJ. But I think the question is will these court cases be one of the instigators to get that process moving?
Yeah, the most recent court filing that Jim reported on, the courts found that if left unregulated, the trade in marijuana within states would impact interstate commerce, and and Congress has the right to regulate interstate commerce, so that's why the courts landed where it did. The federal restrictions on banking have had a significant negative impact on access to capital, which has me thinking about, in particular here in Massachusetts, the social equity promises that were made to people of color who want to get into this industry. But if you can't get access to capital, it's very hard to get involved in this business. Do you think, Paul, if there was more relaxation at the federal level, we would see a larger number of people of color in the game here in Massachusetts?
Maybe not. How's that for an answer? I think one of the concerns is if you legalized it federally, you would have, in time, you would have dominance by a handful of companies. I've heard the concerns is that the West Coast growers would take over the market from the Pacific to the Atlantic. So I'm not sure whether it would help social equity applicants or not. What would help them in Massachusetts is if they had a regulatory agency that had not been dysfunctional for the last 2 years, and that's an issue that needs to be addressed here in this state in order for the marijuana industry in Massachusetts to prosper.
Adam, I saw your eyes light up at that thought. What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking about the bill that the Massachusetts House recently passed that looks to implement a bunch of reforms for the Cannabis Control Commission, which has been called a rudderless agency by the state's Inspector General office. There's been a lot of umbrage within its own agent, within their own confines, and there's been a lot of talk about the regulations not being clear enough. And I think between the federal prohibition, I guess prohibition's not the right word, but the federal ban, plus some problems in Massachusetts from a regulatory standpoint, these are some very significant hurdles for these businesses to try to climb over, and it's not making it any easier for this industry, which was supposed to bring in a lot of revenue to the state, to prosper.
We talked extensively about that move by the House last week, if you want to go back and check it out in the archives. Eric Lesser, did you have one final thing on this?
Well, I think just the thing to remember is everybody knew going in that this was a product that was illegal under federal law and was always going to be existing in this kind of gray area where within the state it was legal, but it couldn't cross state lines. It couldn't go, you couldn't touch the federal banking system in any way. Everybody knew that going in. I think that made it very important that the state regulations be as crystal clear and as predictable as possible. But it doesn't solve this broader social change we've seen over the last several years, which is you now have dozens of states that have some form of legalized marijuana, and it just simply is not sustainable over the long term for those markets to remain purely local, especially given the need for commerce, banking, loans, federal financial interplay. That's going to be essential.
Speaking of gray area, I'm going to pivot us to a different topic, which relates to legal cannabis, but it is related to synthetic marijuana products, and they're hovering in this gray area. Jeanette DeForge had a follow-up piece this week in the Springfield Republican. The headline, Springfield Council takes first step to ban unregulated so-called gas station weed. Quoting from her work here, the city council took the first step to pull synthetic marijuana products off the shelves of stores across the city, but some aired concerns that the proposed ordinance isn't strong enough. The story goes on to say that while legal cannabis is heavily regulated and tested before sold, manufacturers get around the law by selling hemp products, which are considered agricultural and unrelated to the state's Cannabis Control Commission, these laws we were just talking about, because they contain such a tiny amount of THC that they don't produce a high. But the problem is gas station weed is infused with a substance that provides a high, leaving the products unregulated, untested, and available to people under 21. We're talking about drinks, these gummies. There's other products that they're packaged to look like snacks, or candy in certain instances. Jim Kinney, you also reported on this topic recently. One point you made is that while these products are unlawful, there's no regulations to stop their sales and police can't seize them. Can you give us some more context?
What City Hall told me when I double-checked on this is that the Cannabis Control Commission won't do anything on it. The Department of Agriculture in the state won't do anything. There's no state agency that's willing to do anything to address this issue. So that's why the city is stepping in.
Yeah, well, it was in May of 2024, so more than a year ago, that the Department of Public Health and the Department of Agricultural Resources issued a notice that said that these intoxicating hemp products that were being found around the state are illegal. But, as Jim pointed out, there was no statewide enforcement action taken except the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission notified liquor stores and restaurants that they put their liquor licenses at risk if they continue to sell these hemp-derived, I don't know how to describe them, the intoxicated beverages.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. But they've left it up to localities such as Springfield to identify whether there is a problem and then to go out and to address it. So it's a very haphazard whack-a-mole system of enforcement now, because maybe Springfield's identified as a problem and Springfield is willing to commit resources to it, but who's to say some other community is going to do that?
Yeah, I wanted to get a sense of how much of this stuff is being sold in Western Massachusetts or Massachusetts. I couldn't find any good numbers, but I did find research according to the Brightfield Group that says gas station weed nationally is a $3.8 billion industry. These hemp-derived THC products are a huge industry. Eric Lesser.
Yeah, it's big business. I mean, you see it when you go into gas stations and when you go into convenience stores. I applaud the city for stepping up. I applaud the city council and Commissioner Helen Cullen Harris for making this a focus. But Jim is absolutely right. Or excuse me, Paul is absolutely right.
Jim is too.
They're both right. You have 351 cities and towns in this state. You cannot have a situation where in one town you allow it and in the town right next door you don't. That effectively means it's available everywhere. DPH does have power. If you remember during the vaping controversies with the Baker administration, DPH declared a public health emergency and cracked down on the sale of vapes, in particular to minors. I think this is an analogous situation. I think the state really needs to step up here and put some teeth into their guidance about this product.
But for right now, everybody's kind of saying, like, not my lane. There is a bill pending in the legislature, kind of working its way right through it, but not clear on if or when that would be passed. Adam, in light of that, do you think we will see more cities and towns following suit of Springfield?
I think so. You know, sometimes it takes one community to jump in before others say, hey, that's a pretty good idea. And I think as far as this ordinance goes, they need to find a little bit more of a mechanism to enforce fines, whatever it is, business licenses being pulled. You know, that seemed like, having watched a little bit of that meeting, that was one of the bones of contention was, you know, we can do something about this, but there's no mechanism to actually make it stick. But I do, to your point, Carrie, I think once Springfield passes this, and I think it will pass, you'll see other communities take that ordinance and put it right into their own charter.
The House-passed bill that you mentioned, again, would not do anything as far as providing additional resources to local health boards to enforce the edibles. Interestingly enough, the bill would allow liquor stores and restaurants to sell these products, but only if they are regulated by the Cannabis Control Commission. So I think there's a little politics going on there. I think the package store lobby got involved. We know that package stores, by their own admission, have seen their business decline since recreational marijuana became legal in Massachusetts. And you know, we know the trends about drinking alcohol. Younger generations are not drinking it in the same quantities as earlier generations did. I think this is the liquor lobby kind of looking out for their interests by getting these changes in the House version of the bill, at least.
Well, to wrap up the Springfield piece of it with its ordinance, next level it'll come back to City Council, and we'll see where they go in terms of a final vote. All right, we are going to take a quick break here. When we return, a look at gambling, both casino and sports betting here in the 413. You're listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. This is the Legal Vices edition of The Rundown. I'm joined in studio by Adam Frenier, Paul Tudhill, and Jim Kinney, reporters or former, and former State Senator Eric Lesser. Welcome back, everybody. All right, I'm going to move us on. According to the American Gaming Association, gambling in Massachusetts generated $728 million in annual tax revenue and had an annual economic impact of $3.8 billion as of December 2024. The industry also creates jobs for more than 17,400 people. This headline was in the Boston Globe in late March. Mass lawmakers propose sweeping new limits on sports gambling. Reporting by Chris Sayers, the legislation called the Better Health Act, I think pun intended there, is designed to rein in the runaway growth of sports betting in Massachusetts and ban industry practices that some public health advocates have described as highly addictive. The report goes on to say that legislators and people recovering from gambling addiction raised concerns that regulations have failed to keep pace with technological sophistication of online gambling platforms, which are inundating the sports airwaves with ads. Several speakers drew parallels with the early stages of the opioid crisis. That really stuck out to me there. Eric Lesser, back in 2022, you were right in the thick of this.
Thanks for reminding me.
We can't let you forget when this was being hammered out in the legislature. You know, is there anything, hindsight being 2020, that you think that you would do differently now, knowing what we know?
I don't think so. You know, Massachusetts has some of the strictest, if not the strictest, regulations around online sports betting of any state that has legal online sports betting. And at this point, there are quite a few states, including almost all of our neighbors. You know, I give Senator Keenan a lot of credit. He's been a champion on addiction issues for his entire career. I do think it's extreme to compare it to the opioid epidemic. More than extreme. You know, it's a bit over the top. But there are some elements that now that the industry is maturing, they should always take a look at, and they should, you know, provide oversight. We've got a very good, very professional gambling commission, you know, that can look at and is empowered to ask questions of the operators. I think it's important, though, for people to appreciate that this product is unique in the sense that all of our neighboring states have online mobile sports betting. New York legalized in 2021. Connecticut, it's legal. New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Maine also legalized. So, you know, we have to operate in reality, which is that these products are popular. Millions of people use them completely safely and use them as a form of their recreation to follow and engage with their favorite sports teams. And so the balance here is trying to get at some of the harms, which are a very small subsection of the people using the products while maintaining the experience for everyone else.
To that point, Nathan Click, a spokesperson for the Sports Betting Alliance, which supports these types of activities, said, quote, most people spend less per month on sports betting than they spend in a week on their morning Starbucks. Paul Tudhill, though, do you think, given what Eric said about everybody else was doing it, Massachusetts was going to watch the money go over the border or get involved? Does that justify the move?
Well, I think this proposal that was presented at this forum at the State House earlier it's kind of akin to trying to put the genie back in the bottle. You know, they want to put limits on what you can bet and how much you can bet and what you can bet on, and prohibition doesn't work. Once people have had, you know, the taste of doing sports betting, they're going to want to continue to do it. They're going to find a way to do it. You know, you might as well tell people that you can only buy so many lottery tickets in a week, or you can only play so many Keno games in a week. There are proposals to further limit, or I think they want to ban sports betting ads from televised sporting events. it completely ignores the close relationships that the professional gambling community now has with the professional sports leagues.
The call for that ban.
And the broadcasters. I mean, I'm watching the Stanley Cup playoffs now, and they're putting the odds up next to the score bug on the screen.
Yeah.
You know, between periods, the analysts are talking about prop bets. You can't eliminate that.
Prop bets are those little bets that you can make on the
Who's
speed of a pitch.
who's gonna score the winning goal? Right,
Various
exactly. Yeah.
ways to bet within the actual game,
Right.
which some people say that it leads to the addictive
Correct.
nature of all of this. Adam Frenier, you're a big sports guy. What do you make of this?
Well, I agree with Paul. The genie is out of the bottle, and if they try to impose the restrictions, which I think are well meant and well intended, and it's always good to look at ways to protect the public, people are going to go back to Connecticut. They're going to go up to New Hampshire. They may even find less than legal means in which to make sports bets, which is obviously a problem too. You know, people are betting on sports long before it was legal in Massachusetts and everywhere else. And to Paul's point, I think it would be really hard to really claw things back.
Jim Kinney?
The point came home to me when Pete Rose passed away, and you would listen to sports radio or watch on TV. They would describe the horrible things Pete Rose did, and it said, "Oh, by the way, this segment brought to you by."
Yeah. But Jim's point here is, I think, profound because it really shows how much the culture has changed. And at the end of the day, law, regulation, policy is downstream from culture. You know, I think sports betting is popular. People want to do it, and they will find ways to do it, even if the state doesn't catch up with that cultural shift. So, you know, my personal opinion is it's better to have it. You know, we have a good commission that's able to keep on top of things. Vast majority of the people doing it are doing it safely, and it's a fun part of how they follow their favorite teams. And let's let the industry continue to mature.
Jim Kinney, a headline on a different story you worked on this week. Gaming Commission grants Western Mass $3.2 million in casino mitigation funds. Remind us what these funds are and how we get them in this region.
Well, it was included in the law. Thank you. The recognition that the casino, particularly MGM Springfield, would have an impact on neighboring towns and cities, and that some of the gaming revenue would be used to pay for that. And over the years, it's been used for a number of different things, a lot of DPW-type things, some public health programs, some gambling-related, gambling addiction issues, but a lot of DPW things, traffic, law enforcement.
It was a wide lane looking at the list, right? You're looking at $75,000 to $800,000 per grant, depending on the town that looked at them. Some were using it for marketing activities. Some were using it for new police equipment. One proposal in particular there that I thought was great was the East Longmeadow, taking a look at that rotary that never should have been. Personal opinion there. I always think I'm in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride whenever I use that thing. So it's to your point, though, it's a wide range of ways that these funds could be used. And I could see a critic saying, well, this is sort of an attempt to make MGM pay to play here in the city of Springfield. Paul, what are your thoughts on these mitigation funds?
Well, I mean, as Jim pointed out, the mitigation funds were part of the original law. And I think the Gaming Commission has been pretty consistent in how they've given them out. Most of them have been for, as Jim pointed out, infrastructure work. The idea is to improve traffic flow to and from the casino, so that so that cars don't get bottled up in East Longmeadow or Agawam or wherever as they're trying to get to the casino. You know, some of the other things that mitigation money has gone to, a little more questionable, such as the substance abuse treatment facility that the sheriff runs.
And that's on pause right now, as I understand. They did not make a decision on that ask this time yet.
Next week.
Okay.
But in the past, it has been funded, to your point.
Yes, it has been. It has been funded, but there have been continuing questions about whether it should continue to be funded. Not to get too deep into the weeds on all of this, but it's a result of the fact that the original facility was located. The original treatment facility, the building, was located where the casino is now.
Right.
And so they had to relocate, and so because of that, they were given some mitigation money. Okay, they paid for the relocation, but are they really should they really be continuing to pay for the program itself in perpetuity or whatever?
We'll see,
That's
yeah.
what the debate is about.
Adam, when you look at state budgets, are you surprised that this money has stuck as long as it has? Because there's a question now whether it would be included in the fiscal year budget coming forward.
I think it's a sign of what the budget season is going to look like amid all the uncertainty from the federal officials in what Massachusetts will have to spend. And that's one thing the Gaming Commission debated was, what should we do? Because we don't know if this is going to get replenished for next fiscal year. And they decided to give out what they were planning to give out. And, it'll be very interesting to see if the legislature in its processes going forward here over the next 6 weeks decides to at least give them some money back for this project, or if it's something that goes by the wayside.
Jim, what are you watching moving forward on this one?
Well, there's a couple of Gaming Commission meetings coming up, and they're going to take up that treatment facility over, and that's to look at, and also the budget process, as Adam said. I mean, this might be the end of the road for this.
Eric Lesser, you want to weigh in on what you think, whether this will last another cycle?
It's been on the chopping block now several budget cycles in a row, at least up for debate, up for conversation. I think just zooming out and going back in time a little bit, the justification for the mitigation funds was really as a way to smooth the way politically for approval of resort style gaming and to kind of get the neighboring communities comfortable with the location of these facilities. Now that they are a fact of life and they've been there for many years and that's a settled issue, the continued political justification for the funds, I think, starts to get harder and harder. And a lot of the negative consequences that people had predicted, bad traffic, increases in crime, there's no data to support that has actually materialized now many years into both the Encore facility and the MGM facility opening. So my prediction is, at the end of the day, it's a lot of money and there's a lot of needs for a lot of different funds, and it's pretty vulnerable.
Adam Frenier, something else you've been watching related to MGM Casino is whether or not it will be sold. What's going on there?
Well, Carrie, I don't have, I could probably spend 20 minutes on this and not the 3 that we have remaining, but real quick, there was that rumor that came out last year, reported by Bloomberg, that MGM was shopping around the casino in Springfield and another one in the greater Cleveland area. And during an investor call this spring, MGM officials did nothing to dispel that notion. And if you go to a city council meeting, back to a city council meeting about 6 or so weeks ago, there's been this ongoing problem between the union of card dealers at the casino and MGM trying to get a contract together. MGM says there is some misconduct during the election process to institute this union, which is why they've been opposing it. Some city councilors, though, thought that they're trying to slow walk a contract in case there is a sale so that they're not giving the next owner the contract. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. It's all been rumor. Nobody's confirmed anything, but there seem to be a lot of city councilors that were convinced that there may be something that's going to happen, and they were taking their time during this meeting while they voted to support the union's efforts to also say, the next owner better be ready when they come to Springfield to live up to their end of the bargain.
Well, that relates to the host community agreement,
That's right.
Yeah, rumors that the MGM casino was going to be sold circulated before the MGM casino was even built. But I guess at this point I would give them a little more credence, because by now we know what the MGM Springfield Casino is and what it isn't, and it isn't a destination resort casino. It's a regional casino, and maybe a sale to a company that operates regional casinos, that's their business, would be beneficial for all. As opposed to MGM continuing to operate it and to use it and its other smaller properties as a way to feed customers to its larger operations in Vegas and National Harbor in Maryland.
Final thoughts from either of you briefly in about 15 seconds, Eric or Jim?
MGM admitted a few years ago that the operations in Springfield were a disappointment.
Yep. They said they wouldn't have built it here if they knew what they knew today. I mean,
that's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
Again, with the rise of AI, with the rise of mobile gaming and iGaming, the money and the strategy in gaming is moving to digital products. That's a secular change across the sector, and I think that makes the Springfield facility vulnerable. But I agree with Paul that ultimately this will hinge on what MGM's global strategy is with their regional properties.
All right, Eric Lesser, Jim Kinney, Paul Tuthill, and Adam Frenier, my thanks to you. I'm Carrie Saldo. You've been listening to The Rundown on 88.5 NEPM.